Okay, welcome everyone. Very pleased that you decided to join us today for this lunchtime webinar. We're very excited to have Joe Minicozzi with us. It's been a long time coming. This was originally, at least an iteration of this presentation was scheduled for last March, got delayed because of the pandemic, and here he is joining us today. So we're very excited. Just want to give a really quick bio. Joe is an urban planner, imagining new ways to think about and visualize land use, urban design, and economics. Joe founded Urban 3, his company, to explain and visualize market dynamics created by tax and land use policies. And Joe holds a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Miami and Master of Architecture and Urban Design from Harvard University. In 2017, Joe was recognized as one of the 100 most influential urbanists of all time. So very grateful that he is joining us today. And just want to say we are keeping everyone on mute for this, and then we will do a Q&A period at the end. So once Joe's done with this presentation, I'll allow people to unmute and pose questions. All that said, Joe, take it away.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to fly through a lot of information. Some of you all have seen me present before. Basically it's a visual story or narrative of economics and information and why our firm does what we do. And a lot of that's rooted in Asheville. So I'll go through the information and then we'll have a chunk of question and answers afterwards. So we all know at Asheville, we know its market, its setting, the bluegrass music, the beer, the men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire, your typical little place. But Asheville didn't start this way. This is actually how Asheville started. This is a shot from the 1800s. We've all stood at this location. 15 to 20 years after this picture was taken, this is the exact same location. So Asheville exploded. It just, ironically, we're in a preservation argument on Charlotte Street. And I think we could go and say, all right, let's go back to the original Asheville. I don't think our preservationists are really being preservation enough. We need to get rid of these stone and brick buildings that are in the way of our progress. Anyway, putting that aside, we had the second streetcar line in the entire country. Richmond, Virginia was the only city that had a streetcar network as extensive as ours. Presidents came to visit. This is Teddy Roosevelt on the balcony of the Pack Library. During the 1920s, we were growing at 20% in population every single year of the decade. We became the second largest city in North Carolina. A lot of people don't realize that we were bigger than Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham. The only city that was bigger than us was Winston-Salem. We achieved the highest debt per capita of the entire United States in that process. We were number one in debt. And then when the Depression hit and our books were audited, we thought we had $5 million in the bank. It turned out we had $18,000 in the bank. Little clerical error there. Our entire city council was indicted and the mayor committed suicide. That's how we entered the Depression, flat on our face. Thomas Wolfe, Asheville's favorite son, this is what he wrote in a book. Now, he used the word Altamont, but Asheville has squandered fabulous sums. They've flung away the earnings of a lifetime. They've mortgaged those of a generation to come. They have ruined a city. And in doing so, they've ruined themselves, their children, and their children's children. This is a hell of a thing to say about your own town, right? Particularly around here, how we take that. Basically, he was threatened. His family is threatened. His second book was called You Can't Go Home Again for obvious reasons. So it took Asheville. Now, in Asheville and Buncombe County's defense, we chose to pay off that obligated debt. Unlike most American cities that took part of the New Deal program, we didn't take part of it. So it took us until 1976 to pay off the debt. Here's the headline, 1976, when this happened. Here we are burning the last bond. We got Miss Asheville with their tiara on. They teleprompter and Billy Graham. It's a big deal when Billy shows up. But check this out. It's the third headline in the paper. It didn't even lead that day. The lead story was somebody dying in a prison fire in McDowell County. Is McDowell County even our county? No. That's how embarrassed we were about that. But doggone it, when we got out of debt, we started doing what every other American city did. We started carving highways through the middle of our city. I-240, which became the Crosstown Expressway. And the coup de grace was blowing the mountain open. I love that the Bowcatcher Cut is on a postcard. Incidentally, there's a group of people that actually fought it and proved it was cheaper to do a tunnel through the mountain than blow the damn mountain open. We would have all that real estate on the mountain. On top of that, think of all the tax dollars we'd have up there. But oh no, DOT didn't have the technology to build a tunnel. And even though there is a tunnel right there, what is that, like a football field away? Do we not understand how to do a tunnel anymore? On the other side of the Bowcatcher Cut, the mall happened and our downtown died. So these are shots of downtown Asheville from not too long ago. This is 1980s, 1990s. That's a 1996 Chevy Celebrity. So there's this choir of people that just given up, those children's children, that this won't work here. We're not urban, we're rural mountain people, without understanding what cities are, is a collection of people, as an economic system of how we survive as hairless apes. This is how we work together. So, it's just people that wouldn't do this. Now there's a much longer story here. I'm being extremely quick on this part of the show. The city did some good stuff. The county did some good stuff. They started doing streetscape projects. We had Roger McGuire, the Tessiers, and then Julian Price. My connection is through Julian. Julian started Public Interest Projects, which is a for-profit real estate development company based in Asheville, working on downtown stuff. Pat Whalen is the executive director of it. And I like to say that Public Interest Projects is the BASF of downtown Asheville. No one knows who they are, but they know their products, the orange peel, laughing seed, Zombras, stuff like that. But mostly it's about making housing downtown. So in a marketplace where we were told that no one wants to live downtown, we had to basically self-finance all of this stuff to take the old Asheville Hotel and turn it into apartments. And once you make a place for people downtown and give them that option, y'all might not want to live downtown, but there are plenty of people that do. So give people the option to have that lifestyle if they want it. But we found in all of this conversation is that people were having emotional conversations without a data-driven conversation. Why don't we bring data to the table to explain what's really happening? So if you think about what a city is, it's just a really big real estate development project. So is a county. It's just a lot of real estate that has to operate. So how do you look at that? So when you talk to farmers always talk about land as a crop yield per acre, water per acre, labor per acre. It's in economic terms of rational connection. So let's do the same with this building. The city did the streetscape project. So thank you, city, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree. That's super awesome. We put in retail, office, and residential above that. The taxable value of that property was $300,000 when we got a hold of it. One condo in that building is worth more than that right now. But anyway, putting that aside, it grew to $11 million worth of value over this infrastructure investment. That's a 3,500% increase in taxes on that property. So, hey, city, hey, county, this asset that you're holding just grew 3,500%. Do you have a 401k plan that does that? Do you have any other kind of investment that does that? Did your Christmas fund do that? This is how you build community wealth. Go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. But people have this thing about math. They get stuck on big numbers. So they're like, well, Joe, that's not fair. That's $11 million. We have this Walmart that's $20 million. Okay, that's double the value. But realize it took 34 acres of my community to make that Walmart happen versus 0.2 acres for that building. So when you look at the gross value, it's an apples to oranges analysis per acre. Our building is 100 times more productive in taxes per acre. We're double the retail sales. We're a lot more residents. They don't have any residents, and a lot more jobs. So if you could win a popularity contest and be the next county commissioner or the next city councilor, what kind of cash flow would you want to have on your assets? What would yield you more return, the right side or the left side? I was presenting this in Oregon, and I said, let me just make it easy for you people in Oregon. If you're going to grow a crop, what are you going to grow? Wheat or marijuana? You go with the cash crop, right? This is what we've learned with farming. Why don't we learn it with cities? Okay, I've blasted through a lot of information, and I need you to understand this is not complex math that I'm doing here. I don't have a master's degree of finance. I'm doing straight productivity analysis, and we do this already with other forms of assets. So think about your car. Could you imagine if I was like, my truck gets 650 miles per tank? You'd immediately laugh at me and say, Joe, all tanks are different sizes. It's not about the tank, it's about the gallon. So we go from miles per tank to miles per gallon. The numbers just changed, and we should all be driving BMW Asettas. 1955 car is actually more efficient than a Prius. Who would have thought? And what I find with people, and it's actually there's psychology behind this. Y'all work in math, you're all in real estate. People have, and this is actually scientifically proven, a psychological tendency to misevaluate their own economic self-interest. We are prey to biases. We are prey to the way that our brains work and habits, and we don't think things through. And I get in arguments all the time with people where I can use their own math against them because people just don't do math, or they think they're doing math. They're really rationalizing a bias. So I'll give you an example. This is an NPR article of busing, people to be in charge for buses. You see at the bottom of the article there, $40 to $50 for a student to get on the bus, because in Indiana, they figured out buses and transportation aren't an education process. That's solving a problem of somebody's locational choice of where they chose to live in their house. So why should the school system pay for the citizen's choice? You chose to live out there and not walk to school. Great. You're paying for the bus. This guy, Jeff Bennett, is in this article, and here he is complaining that he's basically sitting in line because he's refusing to pay $40 to $50. So he's sitting there in his car for half an hour to drop his kid off to school each way. So let's do some math on that. Jeff's spending 30 minutes dropping his kid off and 30 minutes picking his kid up. That's an hour a day, right? This is a simple math problem. Multiply times the number of hours a month. And I just pulled the average income of somebody in Indiana. It's about 28 bucks per hour. So that means Jeff is spending $560 of his own money to save 40. Or another way of putting it, Jeff is losing $520 a month. This isn't hard math. Okay, maybe I'm not being fair. Maybe Jeff isn't middle income, even though he's got a car, but we'll put that aside. Maybe Jeff is poor. So let's go with the poverty level at $10 an hour. At $10 an hour, Jeff is still spending $200 a month, or Jeff is losing $160. This is simple. Now, the thing that really bothers me, however, aside from Jeff's ignorance of math, is this. When you read the article, it says right in here, his son can't walk to school because there's no sidewalks. Put in a damn sidewalk. Can't kids walk to school? I mean, how can we not design our communities properly that we're going to have all of these other downstream ramifications? And it's because of how we talk about things. We're more apt to talk about biases and heuristics, the way we think things work, without ever looking at a fact-based understanding of the math of how this all operates. And we need to be agnostic about this and realize that taxes pay for stuff. So I'll give you an example. So Public Interest Projects is a $15 million investor in downtown Asheville. Downtown at the time that they started was worth $100 million as a portfolio. So we're a sub-investor inside this investment portfolio of $100 million. This is the value of fixing up all the buildings in downtown Asheville to a point of 2008 when new buildings came in. So all that latent value was just sitting there. We didn't get a new building until 2008. Now, I love showing Chris Peterson. Chris is a riot. I love Chris. He's a friend, but I don't agree with some of his comments. This is his campaign ads from the 1990s, where he's complaining about downtown investment. Ironically enough, he's a downtown property owner. It helped him too. But $26 million of public investment. Look what he's calling it: downtown development for bureaucrats instead of water, sewer, streets for our citizens. So I'm sorry, is a streetscape project not downtown infrastructure? But let's put that aside. Millions of dollars wasted on unused parking decks. Our city is now making revenue, incredible profitable revenue off its parking decks. But if you looked at it in 1992 time, yeah, maybe they were still empty. But $26 million is a lot of money. So let's do some math here. If you invest $26 million on a $100 million asset and the value grows to 500, is investing 26 and yielding $430 million a good return on investment? I would say so. So why aren't we looking at our analysis and seeing it this way? And Chris is entitled to his opinion. Great. But there's data out here that you can look at and see what's going on. And you're not going to stop Chris. Trust me, you're not going to stop Chris. He's got websites with fire and brimstone. I like that the mayor's being hit in the head with a lightning bolt. He misspelled charlatans, by the way. But I asked Esther, I said, is that a liquor drink? She goes, it should be. So these politicians are essentially managing the city, and they're managing essentially a really big real estate development portfolio. And we have a finite boundary of land. Our state, city of Asheville, is the only city in the entire state that is not allowed to do annexation. Our state took that away from us. Okay. That land is the land that we have. Now, the same is true of the county. The county can't annex Haywood County. So the county's not out of this either, because the county should be thinking this way too. And when you when you look at what the Oxford American Dictionary says, it says incorporate, to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. So by law, your city is a corporation. It's just a really big real estate development corporation with an elected board of directors. The county is a corporation. Our state is a corporation, and so is our country. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert Show in 2016. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. Our president is essentially the executive director of that. And we have a board of directors that's called Congress it's called Congress. So if you're a nerd, if you want to look it up, I've got the code down here, the US code that lists us as a federal corporation. So Asheville is $14 billion of taxable value, which means that Asheville is greater than Ted Turner. We all know our city councilors. Are they making decisions like Ted Turner? Are they looking at data, or are they just looking at Asheville politics on Facebook and seeing which way the wind blows? Would Ted Turner do that? Of course not. So if we're not asking for better information or better dialogue, shame on us for not challenging our commissioners and councilors to bring an A game to this conversation rather than just being some sort of circus of decisions. So we've done this analysis in many different states, as far away as New Zealand, up in Canada, about 35 different states. We've looked at all sorts of different tax systems, and the numbers are all the same. For every dollar of county tax somebody out in the county is paying to the county per acre, their brother or sister inside the city is paying about 5 times that to the same county. So I, as a Buncombe County taxpayer, am more productive to my county than somebody out in Sandy Mush or out in Big Ivy or out in Fairview, even though we're in the same county. Then you get into the Walmart, the mall. This is a 2-story building. This could be in Bat Cave or Black Mountain or Asheville. As soon as you start stacking stories, you start to see this exponential gain in value. Or another way of putting it, when you stack stories, you're gaining wealth. Now, the opposite is also true. I presented at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers conference. I don't know if y'all hang out with tax assessors. If you could imagine 3,000 of them, it makes a realtor conference feel like Burning Man by comparison. It was the most square conference I've ever been to. But they're awesome people. But this guy was the keynote presenter at the conference, and he did this amazing presentation on how cheap Walmarts are. And I'm sitting there drinking my coffee thinking, this is awesome. This guy's getting all of his property tax bills lowered with one meeting. Think about it. When you have a captive audience of assessors and you prove to them how cheap your buildings are, you're done. Assessors are agnostic. If it's a pile of crap building, it's a pile of crap building, right? There's no extra value there. I'm having a coronary because I'm like, how is he getting away with this? Like, why does no one care? And so I went up to the microphone and I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he honestly shot back, 15, 20 years. We're designing the building to depreciate as fast as possible. We'll build another building and depreciate it down again after that. Asheville experienced that. There used to be a Walmart over on Tunnel Road, which is now in Ingalls, and Walmart just moved a couple miles down the road. That's their pattern. Don't hate the player, hate the game. If you have a tax system that rewards that, put simply, when you build a crappy building, you pay lower taxes, period. But this is your corporation. Is that what you want? Is that what we want to build, is wealth in our community? Buildings that are just landfill? Is that what we want? Or if we're going to do that, let's just at least have a conversation about it. Let's vote on it and say, yes, what we want is a building that has the life cycle of a cat. We're cool with that. By the way, I'm a dog person. No offense to cat people. I'm just making a point. These buildings don't last long, unlike our buildings downtown that have paid off for generations. Remember, we didn't build most of these buildings downtown. That was built by a generation of souls back in the 1920s, this lost group of hominids that somehow were able to build multi-story buildings and mixed use that could be adapted. So why don't people see this stuff? Well, I would argue that people don't see it because we're not bringing the information in a way that people can digest it. So if I can show you your brain, like we all go to the doctors and they use technology to show us stuff inside our body. So this is a map of a brain. I've got brainstem activity in blue, and then I've got creative thought process in the green strands. So our brains have multiple ways of working. These are 2 ways. So I could actually visualize that. Can we do an economic MRI of our place? So let's take this to the county. This is our county's total value map. This is how we typically talk about real estate. We've got non-taxable and gray. I'm just going to be crude about it. This is Mount Mitchell over here. It's not paying taxes. I don't care about it. Green is low value. Purple is high value. So I've got low value up here in Big Ivy. I've got purple right here, this is the Biltmore estate. The Biltmore estate's worth $100 million for that parcel of land. That's very impressive. My house isn't worth $100 million, but my house also isn't 180,000 square feet sitting on 8,000 acres of land. Like, they basically have the biggest gas tank over there. So it's not really a reasonable way, I would argue, to look at it. So rather than total value, let's do value per acre. And the map just changed just by changing the question. And here it is in 3D. So by looking at this model, now we're all paying 6 mils across this county model. Drape a blanket across this thing that's 6 mils thick. Where's the county getting all of its money? We made this back when one of our state representatives called us a cesspool of sin. And we're just like, really? So we had actually people within our county that thought it was okay to say that about Asheville. And it's just like, well, how about this? How about a thank you card for all the money we're shoveling out into the county and to support this county in taxes? Because you can see it in this model. You can also see Black Mountain. You can see its little downtown popping up over here. So here's a question. From a real estate perspective, why aren't we replicating the wealth that we've got? Why don't we have more Black Mountains in the county? Why isn't there one on the south side, on the west side? Let's grow up Weaverville. It doesn't all have to be dependent on downtown Asheville to shoulder the burden. Additionally, if you look at West Asheville over here, West Asheville is a heck of a lot more valuable and potent than East Asheville. Why don't we have a little Main Street in East Asheville, North Asheville, and South Asheville the way that we've got one in West Asheville? Let's find ways to cultivate wealth and do things that these are the reasons why people move here, to have nature and the man-made together. Let's make more of that instead of just placeless sprawl. And you can see that how much the sprawl doesn't really give us much. It's that simple. The taxes drive that. But you have to show people that and not just tell them that that's the case. So we're big believers in these models. And it's not just North Carolina that we can do it in. Here's Kansas City. You can see not only downtown Kansas City, but you can see this other thing. This is their streetcar suburb of Country Club Plaza. You can also see Kansas City, Kansas over here. This is Manchester, New Hampshire. Guess where downtown is? Who would have thought? This is Bozeman, Montana. This is Brevard, North Carolina. The megalopolis of Brevard of 8,000 people. Guess where downtown is? And then here's the Walmart over here by the entrance to the mountain. Like, why would you do this? Waste your real estate like that. So also retail taxes. Now, just so you know, every North Carolina talk that I do, I just want you all to know, our state makes it impossible to do what I'm about to show you. Let that wash over you. For some reason, our state has taken away the ability for us to look at retail taxes. I can get them in progressive places like Minnesota, California, Colorado, ultra progressive places like Alabama, South Carolina, not North Carolina. We don't want you looking at this stuff. It's dangerous, apparently. But anyway, here's Hennepin County, which is home to Minneapolis. You can see it's downtown. This is the retail tax model. And they have Mall of America. I was talking with our analyst about it. I'm like, hey, Josh, where's downtown? He's like, oh, it's up over here. So this is downtown Minneapolis's retail productivity versus Mall of America, the biggest mall in our country. Who would have thought that a monolithically retail environment was actually less productive than downtown? It is. Data shows it. This is all spatial analysis. This joke doesn't work for people under the age of 35. I get it, but it works for the rest of us. So I have to use it. Well, another misnomer is people are like, you just want big buildings. Like, no, you're missing the point. I just want you to do the math on this stuff. This is a skinny house in Boston built in the 1800s. It's 10 feet wide. This thing's pulling $62 million of value per acre. It's crushing it. You know, some people are okay with small houses. An architect bought it. These are the actual Zillow pictures, and it's 10 feet wide. This is a house that's 7 feet wide. The whole parcel is 356 square feet. In lots of zoning codes, that's illegal. We have lot minimums. It's like, why would you do that? This house is like smaller than a smart car. Somebody lives in it. It's $64 million an acre. These are some in Washington, D.C., $67 million an acre. It's like houses, how you have to have diversity in your marketplace. There's a diversity of buyers. Build your wealth. Or the other thing is, in the case of our community, we're like, oh, we're doing fine. We've got plenty of money. It's like, really, do we? Is that a long-term game? Is that going to really work its way out? So this is Lancaster, California. It's up and over the mountain from Los Angeles. They had their growth spurt, and now they're looking backward and realizing how stupid it was. So they didn't really grow all that well. There are 166,000 people here. They have a couple buildings downtown that are over 3 stories tall. Can you spot them in the model? You know, that's it. They don't really have a great downtown. Their downtown's and Hendersonville has a bigger downtown than them. But what's crazy to us is they have 953 miles of roads. Now, I don't know what that looks like, so we put it on a map to show them. So when communities have roads, once a developer builds those roads have to be rebuilt every 50 years. So every 10 years, you have to do a millage, what you scrape it and resurface it. And you're supposed to do that for 4 cycles, then you have to rebuild it. It's maintenance. Now, what's crazy is when you look at a city's budget or a county's budget, they list asphalt as an asset. So we were sitting with the finance officer and I was like, look, my computer's an asset. If I had to deliver a vehicle, that's an asset. If I had a piece of real estate like a hot dog stand, these are all assets. Can you pick your roads up and can you sell them to Modesto? And she goes, well, no. And the engineer that we're working with goes, well, that's a liability. And I'm like, yeah, it's a liability. So here's the deal. These are when they built all of their roads. You can see that in the early 1900s, they had their great grandparents went on a little road building spree, and then everybody went to sleep until World War II. You can't help but notice what happened in World War II, particularly 1953, when they built all of these lane miles. Well, guess what? That comes back to haunt your parents' generation in 1983 with the first rebuild. So think about being on city council in 1983 when you're hit with this huge capital bill. What do? You let out more development, get more real estate going, get more taxes into your coffers, annex more land. Well, guess what? That brings more roads with it. So this brings along with it the second rebuild and takes the new stuff with it. So we stopped them in 2015. We said, we want to see how your capital flow works with just what you own right now. What's your build rebuild cycle on that? And this is what it looks like. So when you look backward in the 1950s, no one was penciling this out. If you all can find a document where somebody penciled out the long-term obligation of our road construction from the 1950s, I'd be happy to see it, but no one was doing that math. We just went ahead and just doubled down and changed the way that we build our country. Then we went ahead and doubled down on it again, saying, hey, this is what people want. Obviously, people want America to look this way. And we built more of that infrastructure. And guess what? We're not adding more roads, and it's getting bigger and bigger. So I feel that I have an obligation to the generations past me to say we're screwed. Every American city is in this position. We can't carry this infrastructure burden. So in the case of Lancaster, we flushed all of their money into the roads to show them what they could afford. So they can afford 50% of their roads. Our recommendation was that some of their roads, they have to revert to dirt, just let them fall apart. You can't maintain them at that scale. And this is going to be tough. We have kicked this can down the road for close to 70 years and not solved this problem. And it's the birds come home to roost. Somebody's got to pay for this stuff. And I understand this is super depressing. There's a way out of it. So this is an example, Eugene, Oregon. This is their productivity model. Oregon doesn't have retail taxes. So basically this is it. So we took the whole city and floated it in a lake. So zooming in here, above the water line is all of the taxes paid. Below the water line is the cost to create those parts of the community. So if you live out here, this is what you're paying in taxes. Well, this is what it costs the world to make it so that you can get to your driveway, basically. Cost of roads, pipes, sidewalks, all the physical hard stuff built into the system to get to your property. Now, like any business, in my business, I do this. I do a P&L. I net my expenses against my revenues. That's how I stay in business. What's net positive is in black. What's net negative is in red. Now, remember, this is a $35 billion corporation. So they should look at what's net positive and what's net negative. So here's their model. You can see downtown is crushing it. This is the top of the model. If you lift this up like you're looking for a salamander under a rock, this is the subsidy. So you can see it spread across the whole entire model. This is the facts of their situation. So we're agnostic about it. It's like, what's the data? So here's how it breaks down. We call this the Brady Bunch slide. We have residential, low density, medium density, high density, mixed use, low, medium, and high, commercial, low, medium, and high. And these are the sticker prices. So single family housing is subsidized to the tune of about $1,400 an acre in their community. This is no surprise. We've had this data since the Nixon administration. The Nixon administration published this document called the Cost of Sprawl. So Tricky Dick was an environmentalist, and he was pointing out this number. He gave every community this book to run the numbers on it. But the reaction is, but hey, Joe, we want houses. I want that single family house. Well, it's like, yeah, you want that addiction. You want that sprawl that you're doing. I'm okay with that, but don't do it for 80% of your land use. Keep it in check. You know, the same way I'm going to keep my diet in check. If I eat a cheeseburger, when I do eat a cheeseburger, I'm going to go on a mountain bike ride and I'm going to eat a salad. I keep my diet in balance. Do the same thing with your land uses. It's called a transect, but it's like a tree ring of a city. You need to balance out all of your land uses. You can't just have one land use consume 80% of the tree. So go back to your model, put a pause on single family housing and say, let's try to find a way to do more things to add value to our community. So in their case, they have this thing called Crescent Village at the north side of town. Just do 4 or 5 of those for now. The other thing that we need to do is understand what incentives are already in place that bake in a certain model that we're currently eating. What are the incentives that are there? It's not a free market. And I'll show you an example of this. So this is taking the buildings off the earth and just looking at the dirt value per acre. So you see this neighborhood up here in the upper left. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming, by the way. All the dirt here is the same value, right? We always do these models because what we're looking for are these anomalies over here on the right, or we're looking for weird patterns that you're seeing over here on the commercial. Some of this might be policy, some of this might be human error. But in this case, this is policy. So I was presenting at 8 a.m. I was like, hey, what's going on here where this dirt is $15,000 an acre? And when you cross the street, the dirt goes up to $40,000 an acre. It's the same zoning category. Excuse me. How does land double in value when you cross the street? And the tax assessor raised her hand and she just yells out, no, you don't understand. I'm like, what am I missing? She goes, well, they have more land. The more land you have, the lower the value per acre. The mayor just about spat his coffee out of his nose. I'm like, so I get more of your dirt and you give me a discount? And she goes, yeah, there's less people that can afford larger parcels. I'm like, all right. I've got 3 miles of road around here. This fellow's got nothing. I got 200 feet. She goes, yeah, we don't count infrastructure as part of the valuation. I'm like, okay, so you're going to discount the land, the bigger parcel, and you're going to ignore all of your costs. And that's a free market. And she's like, well, but that's our standard. So I went to the assessors conference because I said, does that work that way for diamonds? If I get a bigger diamond, is it cheaper? Because there's less people that can afford a bigger diamond, right? If we follow through that logic, there's less people that could afford a bigger bar of gold. And so I asked the assessors, by the way, their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. I showed them this and I said, how is this fair? And how is this equitable? To their credit, they're like, it's not. I'm like, where did this come from? Did Moses deliver this standard to you? They're like, we don't know. So what happens in the marketplace? If you're giving certain discounts to certain types of real estate investor, they're going to take it. It's going to manipulate your market. Do y'all follow me on this? This is baked into our system that you all are operating in, and it's got massive distortions that come down to matters of equity. Take a huge step back on things that your association was, I'm talking nationally, let's say, the National Association of Realtors is coming to grips with, and starts with redlining. I don't know if you all know redlining. I highly recommend the book, The Color of Law. But basically in 1934, the federal government was changing the way that we do real estate. We went from 7-year mortgages to 30-year mortgages. That's a massive change in the economic system. Now they wanted to spread it across the country because they wanted to keep us from being socialists. So the more people that we can get into housing, the more that people would fight socialism. It's political. So every city across the country that was over 50,000 people made a map where they rated their real estate. Best is green, desirable is blue, yellow is declining, and red is hazardous. So basically you wake up one day and your property is deemed hazardous because of the color of your skin or your ethnicity. And I'll give you an example of that. So this is Denver, Colorado. This is one of the more obscene red line maps. I love this one. Primarily because so if you look over here, what they're looking for is foreign-born population and African Americans. If you're African American, you're deemed hazardous, and then every city got to pick their foreign-born person du jour of who they wanted to whack. Well, unfortunately for my people, we were the biggest population in 1930s to happen in our country. We're Italians. So you're going to find a predominance of Italians, and then look at the next one under that, Germans. what type of Germans are coming over to our country in the 1930s? Well, that would be called Jewish people. So you'll see a predominance of Jewish and Italian redlining mixed in with the African Americans. Now, the difference is I can change my name to Smith and be just fine. You'll never know that I was Italian. But Black people don't have that option of changing the color of their skin. So if you look at the maps, this is one map, and you can see clear as day that 35% Italians. So that neighborhood gets redlined. That's bad. Got to watch out for those Italians. What I find kind of funny when you look in these documentations, you can see the neighborhood immediately to the left of it is yellow. It actually has more Italians in it. And it's like, this is how arbitrary it was in their decisions. It's like, apparently those Italians are better than the other Italians. Well, these Italians are better because they're the bootleggers. These are the ones that are peddling illicit alcohol. So you don't want to mess with the mafia. Now, across the train tracks, here's an African-American neighborhood with cheap houses. And sure enough, are there Negroes here? Yes. So done. It's redlined. They don't even put down a percentage. At least the Italians are going to get a percentage. What's nefarious about this is one red line neighborhood. Let's go right next door to this red line neighborhood. This is a neighborhood that's listed with Negroes. But let's read the text here. This is the best colored district in the United States. It's listed as a Negro country club. It's got brick houses. But were it not for the colored population, this would be rated a yellow neighborhood. It is a C. It's right there in the text. Sorry, you're Black. What can we do about it? Now, what does that mean in economic terms? Well, one is they can't sell their houses because no one can get a mortgage. So they're seeing right in the text, they have to go to a secondary market and find predatory loans, higher interest loans. A lot of times that if they missed a payment, they lose their house. White people didn't go through this experience. So we were doing a project in Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. So here's the Kansas and the Missouri side. And they asked us to do a run line analysis. And we're like, all right, I can show you in the model right now. Let's just put a pause on this for a second. See this line right here? See how it's orange, pretty much as a square, and then it drops off as you go east? Why is that? Now, when I analyze these maps, it's like a doctor looking at a broken bone or something like that. I can tell that's because it's redlining. You know, it's like, and sure enough, you could pull a red line map and there it is. East of this one road called Troost Avenue, which is their version of Merriman. East of Merriman, everything got redlined and yellow lined pretty much. And sure enough, you see the long-term effect of this. Now, remember, we did redlining from 1934 to 1968. So it stopped over 50 years ago. And that economic condition is still there. We dropped this map on top of a racial map. White people are blue, African Americans are green. Look at all the African Americans that are still trapped on that side of the line. What's up with that? Okay, this is emotional. How can we put that aside and just look at the economics of it? Well, when you disconnect somebody from an economic system, they can't pass that wealth along intergenerationally. So usually what ends up happening in these neighborhoods is they just pass the house on to a kid. Now the kids are just like, well, whatever, I'm not going to stay in Kansas City because Kansas City is racist. I'm moving to Detroit or Atlanta or Chicago or whatever. And they long distance own the property and they let it fall apart, or there's multiple heirs and they just can't work with each other. So we're looking for the economic residual. Well, that turns out to be vacant land. So these are all the vacant parcels in the area in brown. And you can see when you just look at a map, there's a high concentration of vacant parcels in those red line neighborhoods where those families have been disconnected from the economic model. When you look at all of them in aggregate on the Kansas side, you're looking at 3 square miles if you shove them all together into a square of real estate that has roads, pipes, sidewalks, garbage truck still goes by, but there's no building on it. On the Missouri side, it's even worse. It's like 7 square miles. To give you an idea of scale, this white square right here is called Gladstone, Missouri. It's a town of 20,000 people. It's the same size as that square. So you can house 20,000 people if you could figure out how to do this. Now, there's a cost to this too. This is tapestrying the red line map back onto our economic model. And you can see with your own eyes that when you step from green to blue to yellow to red, there is a haircut that you're taking today. Even though you stopped doing this in 1968, you were losing wealth in your community and you are hemorrhaging real estate value. On the Kansas side, it's even worse. Now, what's awesome about clients is that usually when the city's in worse shape, they're more serious about solving their problems. So the Kansas side is just, they're destitute. They're just like, look, you need to really help us on this one. So we're trying to give them a solution. And these are all their vacant parcels in their community. This is one neighborhood the size of Burton Street neighborhood, about half square mile. Look at all the vacant land. Well, what do you think is going to happen with who's left over? These are all the tax delinquencies. So poverty is a really serious problem on both ends of the spectrum because you're losing taxes out of this too. So we went into the property to show them these are the 732 vacant lots in Brown here, averaging $400 of value per lot. So what's the taxes on that? Like $40 a year? So that's not going to pay for the services and infrastructure. That's bad. Now, if you put a house on it, it's not much better. It's like 17,000 for the average value of a house, taxable value in the house. But, doing the math on that, that's 40 times better than vacant. So just to give them an example of the cost and consequences of their racist policies, we just went back to 1930, pulled the actual values of the houses, which are in the documents, here they are, and we glued them back onto the parcels and said, let's just assume that you never followed racist policies and you just let this neighborhood alone. And it just people paid taxes on their houses. How much taxes would you have accrued with these 732 houses that you lost? So we did a net present value analysis of it, ran the numbers, and basically it comes down to about $30 million. So flash forward, I'm presenting to the county commission. It's a joint city county government there. And I said, you need to realize your great grandparents followed racist policies. Now, it wasn't their fault. The whole country did it back then. But the consequences is they paid $30 million in lost taxes for being racist. They basically wrote a check for $30 million and just lit it on fire. That's what you lost in this one neighborhood. Imagine what the totality of that is countywide. Now, they're right now sucking wind. They're losing money. So we had to how do you stabilize that? Start small. You only need 18 houses to stop the damage there. So what's going to happen in the marketplace? Y'all work in real estate. The bank's going to show up and say a house costs $180,000. The taxable value is $17,000. We're not going to underwrite a mortgage, right? Is that racist? I would argue that it is, because we wouldn't be in this position if it weren't for the original sin of the racist policies. So that's a problem. So what we recommended to them is to bond out 18 houses, do a tax increment district, just reach into their general fund. And just to close on one last example, it's like, well, that's 1968. We stopped doing that. This is my house in Montford. I live upstairs. I rent out the downstairs. This is my neighbor who's African-American, retired Vietnam War veteran. He suffers from PTSD. He's got COPD. He's an old man. He's fallen apart. And I decided to look into their tax bill and we actually looked into the whole county. But one of the things that the assessor will say is, well, Joe, there's property selling in your neighborhood. This lot sold for $81,000. And so therefore the dirt under the Lordman's property, because it's better, is $89,000, right? So if you look at the tax bill, you're going to see the land value starts $90,000 per acre. The dirt value is about $500,000 an acre. His house value is $129 a square foot. His value is growing at 19%, paying $10,000 in county taxes. All right, fair enough. Let's go over here to Kimberly Avenue. Y'all know Kimberly Avenue. It's a beautiful street, faces a golf course, underground utilities, incredible view. I'll take this last house over here by this teen off area. So look at its view versus what my neighborhood is. And let's look at the numbers. So it's $129,000 for the lot. It's $500,000 for the property. So per acre, the dirt is $447. The house is $107 a square foot. It's only grown at 6% in value because apparently no one wants to be on Kimberly Avenue, and is paying $9,000. Let's bring the Lordmans back into this. How on God's green earth is this remotely fair that's $447 an acre, $447,000. My neighbor's is $500,000. Is it because my neighbors have an advantage with the view of the garbage cans? What's up with that? 19% growth versus 6% growth, $129 a square foot versus $107 a square foot. So what that yields in a tax per acre is $9,000 versus $10,000 an acre. So my neighbor is 12% more productive in taxes. Let's not stop there. Let's go to the top of the mountain. Way up here, if you can see off in the distance, there's this house on top of the mountain. It's got a tennis court on top of the mountain because y'all need a tennis court on top of the mountain. You don't want to go play with the great unwashed down in Asheville. wealthy house. Okay. When you look at the dirt value per acre, how is this even remotely same? 500,000, 440, 84,000. How is dirt on top of the mountain worth less than dirt in my neighborhood? When you look at the taxes paid per acre, we've got 5,000, 9,000, and 10,000. How is this fair? And if you look at the property up on top of the hill, you must say, well, hey, the zoning, you can do 6 acres or 6 units on top of that tennis court one. And what the assessor will say is like, well, it's steep slopes, you can't do that. It's like, well, no, this is probable future income. This is the state law. The zoning says you can do that. So, okay, maybe it's difficult. I mean, I'm an architect. Maybe let me just take a look at this. This is the block up on top of the mountain. So you can see here's that property at $84,000 an acre. If you just cross the property line, it goes to $439 an acre. Does this make any economic sense to you? How are they giving this person this break? For $5,000, just going down the block, this person at the other end of the block is paying $11,000. And it's insane what I'm seeing in our tax system. This is my neighbor versus Donald Trump's attorney, Sidney Powell. My neighbor's $129 a square foot. Sidney Powell's $107 a square foot in Biltmore Forest. Look at those two houses. Would you say that this one's the cheaper one? Or let's take a look at the growth in value. Sydney's is going up at 26%. But she's paying less taxes, $4,000 an acre in taxes versus $10,000. This is one of the guys I know, Reggie Harrell. His house is $125 a square foot. Sidney Powell's is $107. Now Sydney's has actually been renovated. I don't think Reggie's renovated his house. I'll tell you that. 266% growth in value. He's paying $4,000. She's paying $3,700 an acre. Now, the New York Times did this article about the inequity that's in the tax system, where they basically looked at purchase price versus sale price. And like we call these things the J curves, that the lower your value of house, the more you get jacked up, the higher the value, the more you get a discount in the assessment. So we ran our numbers in Asheville or Buncombe County, and here's how it works out. If you're lucky enough to buy a house in our county for $225,000, you get assessed at $225,000. If you buy a house less than that, you get assessed higher. If you buy a house more than that, you get a discount. Isn't that awesome? So that's how our system works. So if you could take that and say, okay, if that's how you're being assessed at a purchase, what happens with every reassessment? Does the same thing apply? Well, the answer is yes. This is my house in the last 20 years. I must be an awesome real estate investor. Because I'm buying a house way under market value at 13. I get a 13% bump as soon as I bought my house, like basically in half a year. But you'll also see some weird things that the county is assessing outside of the cycles. So the cycles are happening with these black circles every 4 years. Why is my property value changing in between cycles when we're not doing anything? And so we applied that to the Lordmans, and both mine and the Lordmans property jump up like that. When you look at Sidney Powell's, and we just went ahead and threw Bill Cecil's property in as well, but they're dropping down in Biltmore Forest, particularly after the recession. And Bill's lost value about a 1% over the last cycle as well. But when you look at this over scale, obviously I should start giving some real estate advice because I'm a hell of an investor with my value growing at 400%. So we looked at the whole countywide parcels based off the lowest 20% of houses and the highest 20% of houses. And these are all the different percentiles from lowest to highest. And it tracks really well that the higher your property goes up, the lower the value. So lowest wealth properties are growing up at 300%, while the highest are only growing at 138. Now, here's where the problem comes in. Y'all are working in the real estate market. This is our income. This is CPI. The median income is coming nowhere near the inflation in our housing prices. So we are pricing ourselves out of our damn county in this process. This is going to be a serious problem. We're already having it. Today's newspaper had 2 articles on it. And the other thing is, you see here is this is the parcel that I showed you earlier on in my neighborhood. It sold for $70,000 in October of 2020. In January of 2021, 3 months later, the county jacked it up 16%. Why? You can go and find parcels all over the county. Here's one in Biltmore Forest that sold for right here, $525,000. This is what it sold for, $525,000 in 2015. In 2017, it was immediately reduced down to $507,000, and it has stayed flat ever since. Why did they get a discount after transaction, and why are you suppressing them? So here's a model of land value change in our community with just looking at Black Mountain and Montreat. Why is the dirt not changing in Montreat, yet the dirt everywhere else in Black Mountain is changing? And when you add buildings on top of it, you see this. So what we need to be concerned about is what's happening in our housing stock, in our humans. So these are all the people in our county and their incomes. $10,000 of household income. We actually have poor people here. The average household income is $74,000. This is the stock or housing stock that we have. And you'll note that there's a lot more poor people than the housing stock that gets built for them. The same is true at the upper end. There's a lot more wealthy people than the stock that's built for them. But the rich have the opportunity to shop down this grade. The poor don't have the opportunity to shop up this grade. There is constriction on the supply, pushing downward pressure on the lower income. And these are all the institutional investors that don't live here in our county that owns the stock. This is a serious, serious problem. There's a lot of stock that's just owned by like 38% or 28% of that are folks from Florida. 1 in 5 houses inside those white boundary areas is owned by an institutional investor. So you're talking like a CalPERS Teachers Fund or whatever. That's a problem. So just to close on this, this is Black versus white. Black people are in blue, white people are in green. The majority of Black-owned households are somewhere between $70,000 and $90,000 worth of value. The lion's share of white are between, the middle market is somewhere between 150 and let's call it 175. So taking that J curve and applying it on here, you see that the majority of African Americans are in the penalty zone, where their property is being assessed higher than its market value, where you'll see that the white folks are reaching a higher level of green. And we have poor white folks as well. But looking at the numbers, 2.4% of African American owned households get the benefit of an equal or higher or a lower level of tax, a tax break, if you will, where 17% of white households get it. So is this racist? It's certainly looking that way. When you look at our red line map and the value change in our red line map, you're seeing African American red line, traditionally red line neighborhoods jumping at 30%, 38%. Meanwhile, Brucemont Circle's at 17%. Biltmore Forest is 11%. We're suppressing the value on the wealthy to give them a benefit and taking that money out of the lower wealth individuals' pockets. And we did the analysis on this stuff. This is starting to come out now. We're talking with the county about this. And just looking at Brucemont Circle versus Burton Street side by side, they're literally 2 blocks away from each other. 90% white. The dirt value's only changed 4%, while the Black neighborhood's gone up 54% in their dirt value. And you can see it right there on the model, the difference. The same with Biltmore Forest and Shiloh. Shiloh is 50% white, 43% growth in dirt value. Biltmore Forest is only 15%. So when you chart these, this is what you see. So West Asheville is killing it. We should thank them. But these are stories that are coming out. These are problems that we're having inside our marketplace. Y'all are at the front end of the real estate industry, and you need to be signaling this bell as well. We need to call our community together and have a more reasonable conversation. These 2 articles happened today, and our finance department's like, we need to be able to raise taxes and do stuff for our city is saying this, and that we're not going to bother doing what other communities did. This to me is just, we're just killing our own community in the process. So I would plead with you all to get involved, to take some leadership in this, to bring some data, try to get some sanity. We call this geo-accounting. Just put the numbers on a map and let's get past our biases. And like your accountant doesn't care if you buy a boat, right? Your accountant cares if you can afford a boat. So how are we having to pay for affordable housing and lose this opportunity? But we need to understand how we're making money in our community, how it's working, and who's getting a benefit. So our argument is to put the numbers on a map and do your math. So thank you for your time. And I'm sorry I went over.
Joe, that was awesome. Mind blowing, a lot to chew on. So I'm going to unmute. I'm going to give people the ability to unmute to pose some questions. Just ask everyone to please remute once you've asked. Put them in the chat, of course, too.
And this was all recorded. I know that I went fast and I have a lot of information, but you can like get the recording and pause it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch it like 20 times to be able to really internalize everything. So I'm glad we have it. Thanks, Joe.
Um, when you say get involved, what are some tangible ways that we could support the effort and make a difference?
It's when I moved here in the early 2000s, we used to have this thing called Asheville Buncombe Vision Project. That was this kind of clearinghouse group think to go through a process and actually put recommendations on forward as a community. I haven't seen us do anything like that in a long time, where we'd have or they used to do blue ribbon committees on, public drunkenness or homelessness and put policies forward. Now, I will also say, in defense of the folks that got involved in those things, they were oftentimes met with a failure of leadership, where policies were brought forward and then our council would just melt. I think, and maybe call me idealistic, but I think that we're at a new point of folks that have come here. I think that our population has shifted. I think that our leadership has changed, that we can probably have an adult conversation now. I don't have a whole lot of faith in our government, but I'm trying to be faithful in this. So I'm actually started conversations with the county commissioners, and to my surprise, they've accepted a lot of this information. And you've only seen a tip of it. They've accepted a lot of this as having a conversation. So Friday, I'm actually going to present to the county manager and try to get them to put a pause on the reassessment. But I don't think it should just be some random citizen. Although I'm not the average bear, I'll say that. But it shouldn't just be me talking to the county. I think this really needs to be a serious community conversation about our real estate market and how to achieve affordable housing. Aspen's been through this. All of these communities have been through this. We can be adults, rather than just letting like this Charlotte Street thing just spiral out of control. We need to move past that. That should be a design discussion, not some we're burning half of Asheville. And I shame on the Preservation Society for treating it that way. So I think we need to hold each other accountable to this. But again, I would think that I don't know if the Realtors Association, if you all could do that or nudge that conversation forward. But the county seems to be interested in it. Usually there'd be a group like a ULI or something like that would step into this kind of a fight or conversation. But we're just not big enough to have a ULI marketplace. Our chapter is actually down in Charlotte, and that's a whole different. They treat us weird up here. Was that all too nerdy, by the way? Was that all right? That was good? Okay. It's hard when you do these Zoom calls. At least if I'm in front of people, I could see the audience. It's harder to do that on Zoom.
Joe, someone asked for the charts. Would you be willing to share that in
Oh, yeah.
format or okay?
Yeah. Do y'all want to see more? I got some other fun stuff. The other thing is, I don't know if you all know this, but Airbnbs, VRBOs, we did some analysis on those, and the assessors just value them as houses. So we found one up on Town Mountain Road that's like valued about $600,000. They're renting it for $1,000 a night. Do the math on that. If it's 70% occupancy, they're pulling $250,000 a year. The owners live in Florida, Melbourne, Florida. So they bought the house. They're just cash flowing it up here. So a little mini hotel, and they get to use it. So that's awesome. Why aren't we tracking that? Because now if we're not tracking it, you're dealing with people, and I'm sure you see this with your clients. You're seeing real people trying to find housing, and they're desperate. Now they're competing against people that are living in some other market that can cash flow it as an Airbnb or VRBO in the county, because the county doesn't care. They're just whatever. And then we double down on it by taxing it as a house and not an income property. That's got to change. And so we need to track that and just say, feel free to use it as an income property, but it's an income property. It's a hotel. You can't call it a house. It's a different animal. So, it's taxes. It's actually paying less taxes than the Lordmans, my neighbors. I talked to my neighbor. He didn't even realize he could challenge his assessment. But the other thing is, think about being an African American. What kind of fair shake are you going to get wandering into an assessment process when you don't hire an attorney? So I've challenged my assessments before, and it's always confrontational. It's like, and that's for me, and I work in the damn industry. So I can't imagine what a regular citizen's going to go through, or someone like my mom who has a high school education and nothing more. So my mom doesn't even know that she can challenge it. Do y'all want to see anything else? I mean, you've got my time. I've got more.
I was going to ask Joe. So, I guess I'm assuming you have to go to the state and have something changed state law wise in order to treat neighborhoods differently or properties. Okay. No?
Nope. No, there's the other thing is, like, I wouldn't recommend treating it differently. I would recommend that go ahead and run your process. Now, the thing is, of the state basically says, and the state rules are actually maybe a tops 8 pages. And then they're just like, oh, go work it out with the Department of Revenue. And the Department of Revenue grabs the International Association of Assessing Officers standards. And we're talking with them next week, Larry Clark. And the assessment standards are just like, be fair and equitable. But the thing is, they give you this like Swiss Army knife of ways of doing it. And I would argue that our assessors' standards locally, the way that we've been practicing, are biased by our past behavior. So it's just like, it's tradition. This is the way that we've always done it. We've always given Biltmore Forest a discount, and I think the reality of it is the way that the process works out. Think about it. In defense of Biltmore Forest, they're paying big property tax bills. So when their assessment changes, they're going to hire a professional, say, go deal with it. And their professional is going to show up and just whack our county assessor around and beat them like a club, because the standards could be interpreted many different ways. So when you're sick and tired of losing, you just don't fight anymore. So you just like, whatever, we'll just discount them and I'll just keep them off their back. So that way, when they do show up, they can say, look, we're giving you a discount and here's what it is. Do you really want to argue with me? And then the property owner is like, okay, fine, we'll let you go. So this is the politics of how it's baked a bias into our system. And so I just want us all to like step out of this fight that we've been having with each other and just say, is this good for our entire community? Is this the best way that we can deal with things? Or are we just going to start putting more Band-Aids on these bullet hole wounds in our foot so we can put the gun down? I'm okay with that, but we all need to be able to see it. And so our bias in my company is, how can we show it to people so that you can see it all together? And that's why we make those maps, so that you can see the data collectively and demysticize it, if you will.
Joe, let me just weigh in here. One question I was going to ask everyone on the thing is to weigh in with an email or a note or phone call in terms of what you learned, what did you hear, and what is the solution from your perspective? Is individual people to weigh in. And secondly, I appreciate you bringing up, in this case, the Biltmore Forest. We must remember that if you add all of the dollars, not on a per acre basis, but the dollars that are actually paid in taxes, there's far more dollars paid on the higher end dollars than there are in the lower end per person. So it would be a completely different argument on that basis, at least the way I see it. And it would be one thing to say, all right, Joe's argument is sound. The people at the low end are getting hosed, and there's something that has to be done about this to make it more equitable. Okay, how much are you willing to pay in property tax increases to make it more equitable? And if you say a few hundred, that would be reasonable, maybe low. If you say a few thousand, does it change your thought process?
I would take it to the next step. I would take it to the next step. I think it's unacceptable that my city doesn't keep transparent records on the revenue streams of what we have in our parking account. I would say it's unacceptable for our community to just let NCDOT waste hundreds of acres of real estate in our downtown with I-26 without having a reasonable urban solution. I would say it's unacceptable for our community to not have a plan for Patton Avenue so that when Kmart flipped, we didn't have a reasonable urban solution that we could grow ourselves up on the inside. It's not about making people pay more money. It's about finding where we're leaking our money all over the place with lost opportunities of growing ourselves up well. If we're more dense with our infrastructure, if we're more efficient, then we don't have to charge people more money. So it's not an us or them. It's not about somebody paying more money. It's like, you know how much money we're losing on Patton Avenue right now because we're treating it like a car sewer for Leicester? Like, that's insane. So it's like, why are we losing these opportunities? We could have grown up West Asheville to have its own compatible downtown with downtown. That was part of the I-26 conversation back in 2004. But no one wanted to pick a fight with NCDOT. So we're basically blowing holes in our feet on prime real estate that could be urbanized. And meanwhile, we're picking up the bill for all the infrastructure. So it affects our taxes that way. So I would argue it's not an either or of somebody's paying more taxes, somebody's paying less taxes. We also have to look at what's the whole financial accounting of our system operate and where are we subsidizing awful development. So
Here, Joe. Here. That lies the argument, right? As you crystallize that argument. And that's what people should be focusing on, not the argument between people. But here's my concern, right or wrong or whatever. Will a politician look at that presentation and come to a conclusion, logical or illogical, in terms of who's going to pay or who's going to bring this up to an equity problem? Are they going to look at your very concise argument that you just pointed out, or are they going to be looking to the property owners?
Can I be perfectly, maybe I don't want to say this on I'm saying this on record. I don't care. I honestly don't trust our politicians. I don't think they're going to rise to the occasion. In fact, I want them to hear that. I'm going to challenge them right now that I am hopeful that they all can step up and supersede anything that we've done. Unfortunately, I'm jaundiced by my past history in this community that I don't think we will. We have some way of snatching defeat from the hands of victory every single time. I've seen our community, our citizens, our community groups rise forward with solutions time and time again to be slapped in the face by their own leaders. But frankly, at this point, I don't care. I'm putting the information out there. It's not going to be just here in Asheville. If you think this is the only show I'm doing, you got another thing coming. I'm doing this in national audiences. We've got the data now to show that this is a problem. And it's not just here in Asheville that this is a problem, but we're going to release the way that we analyzed it so other people can steal this information and do it in their own communities. And we're going to put it on national blogs and whatever. And if our community chooses to look like a bunch of Keystone cops, great. You know, that's their choice. I can't hold everybody's hands and make them make the right decision, but I'm challenging them to be adults and do the right thing. So yeah, I mean, it's, I've seen some dark stuff. And maybe I need to let it go, but I can't. But when you have the county, when we were doing I-26 and they were plowing it into Burton Street, and County Commissioner Bill Stanley said, "We're making this decision for the citizens of our county and not the city." That was his quote. And they voted to plow the highway into the poor Black neighborhood in 2009 when we had a Black president. You know, and we lost. The design center lost that night. So I got in my car, drove down to Atlanta, and told the EPA that they just violated the NEPA Act, and they paused the project. It shouldn't come to some random Joe driving down to Atlanta for us to do the right thing. But our federal government stepped in and paused the project. Now Burton Street is less impacted, but we're still doing many other problems because we're cowards around each other. We can't stand up to DOT and we can't stand up to doing the right thing. That's my monologue, and I'm going to step off my soapbox.
And I think you would find very, very fertile ground within the realtor community on that argument, Joe. And quite honestly, it's way overdue to bring this thing to some semblance of sensibility in our community.
When our school system has to buy housing for teachers, hello, like that's tax dollars going to buy housing because we're so dysfunctional we can't figure out a market. You know, we're playing checkers in a chess match. It's insane. So anyway.
Well, let me go on record as saying I think that you have been a tremendous asset to Asheville, even though they don't recognize it. And I think that's important to say, and I appreciate your time in this presentation very, very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that as well. And I seriously, I have a whole lot of fun with you guys. So this has been a riot. But there'll be more coming out. Look for it. We're talking with the Racial Justice Coalition about some of this stuff. Obviously, we're talking with the county, and the county's actually been awesome in keeping an open mind about it. So we'll see how it goes on Friday. I'm hopeful. As sad as I might sound sometimes, I wake up extremely hopeful. I wouldn't try if I didn't think it would make a difference. So.
Good. The ever optimist. I like that. Well,
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much. This was so enlightening and interesting, and appreciate you allowing the recording too, so we can post that, and we'll follow up with you with any additional information and questions. Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who attended. Please spread
Thank
the word
you.
for you recording it or posting the recording. Thank you,
Thank
Joe.
you all.